If you're an employer, apprenticeships are about to get more powerful and more complicated. In this video, I'm going to break down how apprenticeships in 2026 actually work. Before we get into all the changes, it's worth taking a look back at why apprenticeships are so important going into 2026. We're heading into a period in which skills are moving faster than most businesses can keep up with. Engineering, digital, healthcare, construction, and especially here in automotive, every sector is feeling the pressure. At the same time, the government are pushing apprenticeships harder than ever. They want to see young people into skilled work. They want more adults back into our workplace, and they want to see employers really taking responsibility and building their future talent pools. And with the new reforms that are coming in, apprenticeships are becoming more flexible, more employer-led, and more in line with the skills that businesses actually need. But they are also becoming more time sensitive, with more rules, more funding deadlines, and more strategic insight needed. That's why 2026 is such a significant year. If you understand how the system works now and how it's changing, then apprenticeships can become one of the most effective ways to future-proof your workforce for the long term. There's a lot to know and a lot to think about when it comes to apprenticeship reforms. But before we digest all of that, let's have a look at how the apprenticeship system actually works today. Importantly, an apprenticeship is a job first and a training program second. Your apprentice is a full-time employee on your payroll and with the same rights as everybody else. The difference is that their role is built around learning a specific occupation through structured training and a structured program. Every apprenticeship follows a standard, and that standard maps out the specific knowledge, skills, and behaviours that an apprentice would need to become competent in their role. Training has to be delivered by a specialist apprenticeship-approved training provider who are regulated under Ofsted. That includes the delivery of the KSBs, of the modules of that apprenticeship standard, the reviews, the assessments, and ultimately making sure that that apprentice is ready for what's called the EPA, the endpoint assessment. And this is where the apprentice ultimately demonstrates whether they can actually do that job to pass their qualification. Let's talk about how they're funded, because this is where employers either get huge value or unintentionally lose money. Right now, any business with a payroll of over £3 million automatically pays into the Growth and Skills Levy, formerly the Apprenticeship Levy. And this is 0.5% of their wage bill. This money automatically goes into your DAS account, and you can use this to fund apprenticeships or now shorter modular training. Smaller employers don't pay the levy, but instead they get heavily subsidised training through the co-investment model. In simple terms, the levy is your training budget, and if you don't use it, it expires. If you're not planning ahead, you end up funding apprenticeship programs for other people's businesses and not for your own. With the evolution of the levy and the fact that that can now be used to fund shorter courses, this comes with big opportunity and big bonuses for the automotive industry, but it does also still come with some challenges. The expiration date that currently sits on the apprenticeship levy account is 2 years. So in effect, you have 24 months to pay into your levy pot and then use those funds. From 2026, that's now going to be cut in half. So employers will only have 12 months to fully understand, plan, and spend their levy pot. So if you're an employer that hasn't got an apprenticeship strategy, then you could simply lose out because you haven't acted in time. Understanding how the levy works and what's changing is vital if you want to create an apprenticeship program that's compliant, that's cost effective, and that actually delivers on your long-term workforce strategy. So let's break down how apprenticeship funding actually works, because this is where a lot of employers get confused and where a lot of money is lost. Every apprenticeship standard has a funding band, which is allocated to it when that standard was created. This is the amount of money the training provider has in order to deliver the program. And these costs are funded either by your levy or by government if you're an SME. If you pay into the levy, you can use your pot to cover the full costs. And if you don't, the government funds 100% of your apprenticeship training as long as the apprentice is under 25. If they're over, you as the employer are expected to pay 5% of that funding band. There are also additional financial incentives that are paid to employers to help offset some of that time and support needed for younger learners. These payments go to you directly and not to the training provider. The important part is that funding is not limited. The funding system is a great asset to businesses, but you need to make sure that you're maximising it. Until recently, every apprenticeship had to last a minimum of 12 months, regardless of what prior learning or experience that candidate had. As we've seen through recent apprenticeship reform, that has now been changed, and the minimum duration duration an apprenticeship can be now sits at 8 months. This creates a faster pathway. It reflects some of the standards that are out there and the need for skills that employers actually have. Another major shift is around the off-the-job hours. Previously, this was a calculated percentage of any course, whereas now every single apprenticeship standard has a fixed number of hours that need to be completed. This makes planning much clearer. We can help you plan exactly what training is required, and your provider can build a schedule that works with your business. The most important development is what happens from 2026. A portion of the levy will now be able to fund shorter, targeted training courses. These are designed to hit specific skills such as digital, engineering, or technical updates without committing to a full multi-year apprenticeship. This added flexibility means employers can now tackle specific skills gaps, respond to new technology, and upskill faster without having to commit to full apprenticeship programs. This makes apprenticeships more adaptable, more responsive, and more in line with what employers actually need. Off-the-job training can take many forms. It can be classroom delivery, online lessons, workshops, shadowing, project work, practical skills training, or time set aside for assignments and assessments. The key point is it must be relevant to the apprenticeship and it must take place during working hours. For most employers, the easiest way to think about off-the-job hours is to think about giving your apprentice protected learning time. They're not expected to learn everything on the job, and they need that time to develop their deeper understanding, their technical knowledge, and everything that's required to really be competent at their role. The better that time is planned and protected, the faster the apprentice progresses and the more value they're able to contribute to your business. Before we look at wages and progression, let's have a look at how training is actually delivered within an apprenticeship. There are several ways that this can be delivered, and it's important that you as a business and the apprentice themselves looks at what would work best for you. There's no one size fits all. The first model is day release, and this is where the apprentice spends 1 day a week at a college or training provider and the rest of the week with you. The second model is block release, and this is where the apprentice spends an extended period of time at a college or training provider, potentially on a 6-week cycle or so. This works particularly well in apprenticeships like engineering or manufacturing, where that workshop time is particularly crucial. The third option is on-site delivery, and this is where the apprentice would be allocated a specific coach who would come into your business and work with that apprentice at your site. This includes things like coaching, theory sessions, or practical tasks to be completed. Alongside this, there will always be independent study, and this includes things like online assessments, e-learning, or portfolio building. Although it can be flexible, it still counts as off-the-job learning, so it needs to be done within paid working hours. There is no right or wrong model, but the important thing is the training model that you go for is right for your business requirements and can ensure that everything is in place and can be delivered for that apprenticeship. Now let's talk about wages, because this is one of the most common questions employers have when they start to think about taking on an apprentice. Apprentices are employed on salary just like any other member of staff, and they're also entitled to the same rights. Things like holiday pay, sick pay, pension contributions. The only real difference is the wage bands that they fall on and also national insurance contributions, as if you're paying them under £967, you don't have to make those NI contributions. There is a specific national apprentice wage for anyone under the age of 19 or in the first year of their apprenticeship. Anyone over the age of 19 and after the first year of their apprenticeship must be paid the national minimum wage for their age bracket. This is why setting up your apprenticeship program first matters, because as your apprentice progresses, so does their wages, and you need to be ensuring that productivity is also matching that and they're contributing to the wider business. A well-planned program makes that progression clear, fair, and measurable. For most employers, the simplest way to think about pay is this. You're paying for potential at the start and growing capability over time. When the training, the mentoring, and the progression is in place, those wage increases come a natural step rather than something you hadn't budgeted or accounted for. Done well, an apprentice can become one of the best return on investment employees and be productive within 6 months. So now we've uncovered how apprenticeships work and how they're funded. The next part is recruitment. This is where so many apprenticeship programs succeed or fail before the apprentice has even started. Recruiting an apprentice is not the same as hiring an experienced member of staff. You're not looking for past experiences, for demonstrations of skills, for long CVs. Instead, you're looking for attitudes, cultures, the way they interact with you, and potentially even the wider team. The selection process needs to reflect that. The generation we're recruiting now are not looking on the same job boards as qualified members of staff, and they're not going to respond to corporate stuffy formal job adverts. Instead, they want to see a clear route into an industry, something they can get involved in, something that's accessible and that's easy to apply for. A good apprentice advert is clear, it's simple, and it focuses on what the apprentice will learn, not what they already need to know. It should explain the training, the delivery method, the mentor approach, the support that business is willing to provide, and what that business is actually like to work in. When it comes to interviews, traditional interview methods are often not the best fit for apprentice candidates. A working interview, a short site trial, or a task will actually tell you a lot more about their attitude, their communication, and their willingness to learn. The most important thing is speed, as apprentices are encouraged to apply for multiple roles at once, and they won't be putting all of their eggs into one basket. If you take too long to respond, then someone else will be offering them a place. And the businesses that always do well are those that communicate clearly, respond quickly, and offer a positive experience. This is what's setting them apart from other employers. Done well, recruitment sets the tone for the entire apprenticeship and dramatically increases the chance of that apprentice staying, developing, and becoming a really well-rounded and valuable member of your team. Once you know how to recruit the right apprentice, the next part is choosing the right training provider. This is one of the most important decisions you will make because the quality of the training provided will have a direct impact on that apprentice's success. Every provider delivering apprenticeships must be approved by the Register of Apprenticeship Training Delivery, and this means that they're regulated and approved by government. But approval alone does not tell you how good they are, and provider quality varies significantly. And this is something that not all employers realise. The training provider is responsible for delivering the training, tracking and monitoring the KSBs, providing the assessments, and ultimately preparing that apprentice for their endpoint assessment programme. You need a provider that communicates well, understands your industry, and works in partnership with your business. You also don't need to limit yourself to one training provider. If you've got an array of apprenticeship standards being delivered within your business, then use the experts and use specialist providers for specialist areas to ensure that you're getting first-class training delivery. When selecting your training providers, it's important to ask the right questions. You also need to understand how they deliver the training. Some have workshops and day release models. Other training providers will look to deliver training within your premises. As mentioned before, the delivery model needs to match the needs of your apprentice and the rhythm of your business. A good provider makes the apprenticeship smooth, organised and consistent, whereas a poor provider creates frustration, delays and a higher chance of dropout. So choosing the right one is a core part of running a successful apprenticeship programme. Before an apprentice starts, there are a few key pieces of compliance and documentation that need to be in place in order to access funding. These aren't optional and they have to be in place in order for the apprenticeship to be delivered. The first is an apprenticeship employment contract. As mentioned earlier, apprentices have the same rights as any other employee, and they're entitled to an apprenticeship contract that has to be the minimum duration of their apprenticeship programme. This doesn't guarantee employment thereafter, but the contract has to cover the duration of the course that they'll be on. This sits solely between you as the employer and the apprentice, and it must cover things like working hours, holiday allowance, sick pay and wages. There's then an agreement that needs to be signed by the tri-party of training provider, apprentice and employer. And this outlines everything that's going to be detailed within the apprenticeship. In effect, this becomes the contract of delivery, and it's important that each party within this agreement fully understands what they're committing to. When it comes to hiring someone under the age of 18, they're technically not yet an adult. So as an employer, there are just a few things that you really need to be mindful of and make sure that you've got set up, mainly around your health and safety, safe working and safeguarding practices. Off-the-job training must be recorded throughout the apprenticeship, and it's really important that everybody within the business that's going to be involved in the apprentice journey fully understands what an apprenticeship is, so that they're able to give the apprentice the right support, the right time and the right space that they need in order to complete their apprenticeship. Then consider good practice when it comes to the way that you're communicating with an apprentice and the way that you're onboarding them. They won't have experience within the workplace, so it's really important that things are communicated clearly, expectations are set, measured, and regular check-ins are scheduled. Compliance may feel like the boring part, but it's actually the part that keeps the program running smoothly. When these foundations are in place, everything else then feels easier to manage and funding is protected. When you take on an apprentice, especially someone under the age of 18, safeguarding becomes an essential part of your responsibility. Safeguarding is simply the duty to keep young people safe, free from harm, and protective when they're in your workplace. Younger apprentices are at an earlier stage of their working lives. They may have less confidence, less experience, and limited understanding of workplace expectations. That means that the way that they're taught, supported, and mentored needs to be set up really carefully. Safeguarding begins on day one. Your apprentice needs a thorough induction, covering things like health and safety, reporting procedures, and who they can go to if there's a problem. They should know exactly who their mentor is, exactly who their manager is, and how to get help if they need it. Supervision is also super important, and apprentices shouldn't be left to work in isolation or without oversight. They need access to guidance, support, safe working practices, and always be able to reach out to someone if they need clarification or some help with some understanding. Your training provider plays a role in safeguarding, and they'll have specialist safeguarding teams to support your apprentice, but they shouldn't be relied on as the only point of call. At Apprenticeship Central, we stay close and provide an extra layer of support to all of the apprentices and employers that we work with. We make sure that nothing gets missed, and we become that trusted, unbiased point of contact for both the apprentice and the employer. One of the most important parts of an apprenticeship is the support the apprentice receives day to day. A structured mentoring approach is the difference between an apprentice that grows confidently and one who becomes unsure, overwhelmed, and disengaged. A mentor is not just someone who answers questions. A mentor sets a standard, shows the apprentice how tasks should be carried out, checks their understanding, and helps them build the habits and behaviours that make them effective in their role. For young apprentices with limited workplace experience, this guidance is essential. Great mentoring creates consistency. It gives the apprentice a clear point of contact, helps them understand how the workplace operates, and creates a safe space to ask questions or talk about issues they may be facing. It also gives the employer a reliable way to monitor progress and address any issues early. From a business perspective, mentoring protects productivity. Without clear support, apprentices can pick up bad habits, become hesitant with tasks, or lose focus. With strong mentoring, they progress faster, become more productive more quickly, and add value to the rest of the team. Mentoring should not be seen as an optional extra because it's a core part of making an apprenticeship successful. In most apprenticeships, the only structured review that the apprentice gets is with the training provider, and that might be on a schedule of 6 to 12 weeks. That is alongside every single other review that coach is giving to their cohort of potentially 50, 60 students. And potentially it just becomes that, a tick box exercise. Traditionally, these reviews focus on the technical side of things and the tracking of the KSBs. Have modules been uploaded? Is everything up to date? And does that apprentice look on track from a technical perspective? For many employers, this is where the process ends. The training provider leaves, paperwork's updated, things are uploaded, and everyone just assumes that the apprenticeship is progressing as it should be. But in reality, this doesn't actually give a clear indication of how the program is actually working within your business. Instead, we like to run a wider retained review. Rather than looking at training models, we take a broader view of the apprentice's development and how they're performing day to day. We check in with the mentor, the employer, the apprentice, and the training provider so that every key voice is heard. These reviews look at far more than just qualification progress. They explore the apprentice's confidence, their well-being, attendance, productivity, and overall understanding of the role. They highlight any support the mentor may need, concerns early on, and any gaps between what's happening with the training and what's actually happening on site. By looking at the whole picture rather than an isolated part of it, you as the employer get a better understanding of what's actually happening. The apprentice feels supported, and collectively, the visibility and communication of the programme sets it up for more chance of success. At the end of every apprenticeship, there's an endpoint assessment, and this is where the apprentice demonstrates they have the knowledge, skills, and behaviours for the role. This is carried out by an independent awarded organisation, so not the employer and not the training provider, and this ensures that qualifications are fair and consistent. Before an apprentice can attempt their EPA, they have to pass what's called Gateway. Gateway is the point at which the employer, the apprentice, and the training provider collectively agree that the apprentice is ready for their endpoint assessment. This typically means that all on-programme learning is complete, portfolio is updated and ready to go, and that apprentice can confidently demonstrate the KSBs in order to get the qualification. The EPA itself can vary depending on the standard. It can include a knowledge test, a practical observation, a professional discussion, a project presentation, or a combination of these. The aim is to test the apprentice in a real and meaningful way, not just academically. The employer's role is to make sure that the apprentice has the opportunities, the practice, and the confidence to be able to demonstrate what they need to do. Good preparation makes a huge difference, and the better the apprentice understands what's required of them at EPA, the more likely they are to be able to succeed. When the apprentice passes, they've now completed their apprenticeship program. This means they're qualified, and this is the moment where the investment, the time, the energy and support has all paid off. The transition now between apprentice to a fully qualified member of the team is important, and it's one that should be well communicated throughout and nearing the end of the apprenticeship journey. Progression doesn't have to stop at the end of an apprenticeship, and many employers offer further apprenticeship or training opportunities, so upskilling to a level 4, 5, or even higher opportunities. This keeps skills moving forward and gives the apprentice a long-term future within the business. Retention is also one of the strongest measures of a successful apprenticeship program because it shows that that apprentice has been well supported, developed, and integrated into your team. It also means that the investment that you put in during that first year continues to pay off for many years to come. For many employers, the first instinct is to hire one apprentice and see how it goes, as it often feels simpler and safer. But in reality, hiring just one apprentice in isolation is far riskier than building the foundations of an apprenticeship program. When you hire just one apprentice, everything depends on that one candidate. If they leave, if they struggle, if it's not successful, the entire plan collapses. The mentor has no rhythm to follow, team has no pattern, and the idea of an apprenticeship program loses all credibility within the business. Believe it or not, when you build a program, things actually get easier. A program fills multiple skills gaps over time. Instead of trying to fix everything with one single hire, you're building a pipeline of future talent. The strongest businesses do not hire an apprentice one by one, but instead they build a repeatable, scalable program. They know how many apprentices they'll need each year, which roles they'll feed into, and how long it will take each apprentice to become productive. The results? Well, they've got a stable, predictable, and cost-effective workforce plan. One single apprentice can help your business. A program can completely transform it. Apprenticeships are becoming one of the most reliable and cost-effective ways to build the skills your business needs in the future. We have the funding, the structure is there, but the responsibility sits with the employers to implement this and make it work in practice. If you want apprenticeships to work in your business, the next steps are straightforward. Start by looking at your workforce plan. Look at the roles you struggle to recruit for, the skills that you need more of, and the areas in which you could train somebody from the ground up. Next, look at your funding position. If you pay into the levy, look at your levy pot. What's expiring and what's potentially allocated for future use. If you don't pay the levy, look at which roles could be fully funded for an apprentice under the age of 25, but also consider for maybe older apprentices, which would get you the best return on the 5% contribution. Identify the apprenticeship standard that matches the roles. Each standard sets out the skills and training involved, so mapping these out helps them stay relevant to your business. Then think about structure, how you will support them and how you'll make sure that the training fits around your current operations. Make sure that you're choosing the right training provider and do this carefully. Look for strong communication, a good understanding of your business and the wider industry, and also look at their past qualification rates, not just the reviews. Finally, treat apprenticeships as a program and not just a one-off. When you plan ahead, bring people in and build a reliable system, the whole team becomes better at supporting, training and developing talent. Over time, that becomes one of your biggest competitive advantages. Everything we've covered in this video is what an apprenticeship program needs in order to succeed. Most employers want apprenticeships to work, but the challenge is joining all of these pieces together and getting everybody on board. If you're an automotive business, this is where Apprenticeship Central comes in. Our team recruits you brilliant apprentices. It helps you get them on board. It supports you, the apprentice and the training provider for long-term success, and it makes sure that everyone is on track, accountable and responsible for the success of the apprenticeship program, delivering results you actually need. We handle everything outlined in this guide so that you don't have to figure it out alone. And if you want to know more, click the link below and book a free discovery call today.